We are talking about noun clauses today. Let me just get settled down. Okay, I'm done with this. Noun clauses. Now just pay attention to subject and predicate. You already know what is predicate. Predicate is the rest of the sentence, right? Whatever is apart from the subject is predicate. His behavior was wrong. Now, here, his behavior is the subject. That's what the sentence is talking about. Okay, fine. And we have a verb over here, right? That means SV structure is being followed here. Behavior was wrong. It's a complement. It's not as an object, right? You already know all of this, right? Now, this one is a normal sentence, right? Okay, here his behavior is a noun, which is a subject, right? Okay, was is a verb, wrong is, of course, a noun and a complement, right? Now, what is the difference between a normal sentence and a sentence which has a noun clause? Now, for example, if I write over here, what he did. Now, what he did, here we have a subject, we have a verb, and this is also this whole clause, this whole thing is the subject of the word, the sentence was wrong. Now, that means the subject is a clause, not just a noun, not just a word, not just a phrase, right? It's a clause, right? What he did. Now, this whole clause is a subject. So, in noun clauses, what happens? A clause acts as a subject. So, here, what he did is a clause and is acting as a subject, and was is a verb, and wrong is a complement. So, this whole thing is a noun clause. Do you understand this? Now, if you just look at another example here, we noticed his behavior. We is a pronoun, noticed is a verb, his behavior is a noun phrase, right? And his behavior is a complement, right? So it's a subject. We have a verb here, we have a complement. This is a pronoun. This is, of course, a verb. This is, once again, a noun phrase, right? Okay, fine. But what about this one? We noticed, okay, this is subject, and this is just one word or a phrase. This is what? A verb, okay, fine. What he did, is this a phrase or a clause? It's a clause, right? It's not a phrase because we have a verb here. He did. So when a clause becomes like here, the subject, or the clause becomes an object, right? An object, right? We call it a noun clause, NC. All right? Is that clear to everyone? All of you? Okay. Now, let's have a look at one more example here. We heard, we is the subject, heard is a verb, we is a pronoun, heard is a verb, about his behavior. This is also a noun phrase, and of course, it's a complement over here. We heard about what he did. Now, here we can see that what he did is a clause, right? This one is complement. So it should, sorry, spelling is wrong. Complement, right? So please avoid writing it with I, right? So it's a compliment here. Whereas here, about what he did, right? The compliment is not the compliment. We heard about what he did, right? So here, the compliment is not a phrase, rather, it's a clause. So this means noun clause is the one which becomes the subject, object, or complement in a sentence, right? So if I write here, what he did is a noun clause, about what he did is a noun clause, right? All of them are noun clause. What he did over here, it is also a noun clause, right? So noun clause becomes what? A subject, an object, and a complement in a sentence. I hope you've understood it, and there are introduced in three ways. Let's have a look at those three ways so you could identify them. Let me clear all of this. Let me add some students here. Okay, let me scroll down. You can introduce it by questions like what, when, where, why, whom, who, whom, whose, which, how, whatever. You can, introduce it by alternative words, whether, if, or by the word that, right? These are three ways they are introduced. Now, for example, how I'm going to make a noun clause, right? Okay, using that. He said that I was wrong. Let me clear this first. Let me clear it with eraser. All right. So he said that I was wrong. Now, here, he said that I was wrong. He is the subject, said is a verb, whereas that I was wrong, this whole thing is what he said. So, whatever he said, right? Okay, so it is a compliment. So he said that I was wrong. So this whole thing, right? This that I was wrong is complement, right? And it is a clause. It is a clause. So it is called noun clause, a noun clause, right? Okay. Okay, now let me scroll down and show you an activity here. Write 5 sentences that tell about cultural differences that surprised you when you were outside your own country. Use a noun clause as the subject of the sentence according to the following pattern. Look at the pattern here. How dash surprised me. How surprised me. What surprised me. The fact that surprised me. The way that surprised me. And there is an example here. How Americans use their knife and fork surprised me. How Americans use their knife and fork surprised me. Right? Now, this whole thing in this sentence, this whole thing, how American use their knife and fork, this whole thing, how Americans use their knife and fork, right? This is the subject, and this is a clause. This is a clause. So when a clause is a subject, we call it a noun clause. NC, right? Surprise is a verb, right? So how Americans use their knife and fork surprised me, right? So if this is a verb, right, and because it surprises you, so this is an object. You're an object, right? So how Americans use their knife and fork, right? This is a noun clause because this whole clause is acting as a subject, acting as a subject, right? So same way you got to like make some sentences. So what, for example, what surprised me is your talent. So, what surprised me is the subject, is a verb, your talent is a complement. So, this is a noun clause. Why noun clause? Because this is the subject of this whole sentence. Is that clear? So, you got to make 5 sentences. Please take a snapshot of this one. Take a snapshot. Okay, now let me clear all of this. Take a snapshot so you could do that. There is one more exercise. Let me scroll down. Read the complete selection, the culture of lead time. Okay, you don't have that selection, so you don't have to read that one. Let's have a look at another exercise which is not based on any reading. Noun clauses introduced by that. Let's talk about this in detail. Let me add some students here. Okay. There are 4 important things to remember about noun clause introduced by that. What are they? They can fill subject and object positions. They're often used with an introductory it. The word that can often be omitted in an object clause. No punctuation sets off and that clause from the rest of the sentence. So that means you don't have to use any punctuation here. This you already know because we talked about reported speech, right? And we know that we are not going to insert punctuation here. That he had made a mistake was clear. Now we can see over here it is a subject, right? And we know that this is a verb, and we know that this is complement. So this subject is the whole clause. So this is a noun clause. It was clear that he had made a mistake. It's starting off with it, right? Was clear that he had made a mistake, right? Okay. So this thing is a complement here, right? This is dummy subject. It was clear, right? So we can see that, like, over here, the complement of this whole sentence is a clause, and that is he had made a mistake. The minister knew that his visitor was waiting. Now, here, the minister knew that his visitor was waiting. So, this is a verb, this is the subject, and what he knew is the object, right? Okay. Or you can take it as a compliment also. Perhaps the action doesn't gets transferred, right? So you can call it a compliment as well, right? It's something which is, I would say, debatable, right? Okay, so the minister knew that his visitor was waiting, but one thing is obvious, that this is a clause, whether it be a complement or an object, right? This is a clause. So if a clause becomes, when a clause becomes either a subject or an object or a complement, we call it a noun clause. So this is noun clause once again. You can omit that if you want to. The minister knew his visitor was waiting. Now, these four things you have to keep in mind. Now, before I go ahead, I would like you guys to ask questions, right, to clear up your concepts and also finish the activity which I have given you. Let me stop the recording first.